happening. We were all traveling to Berlin. So it's not like there was this, an oracle there that could have told us it's on or it's not.
Yep.
We've all had to make progressive, even on an individual level, we've all had to make decisions bit by bit on it. But I must admit, Ian, you're the first case for me. This is something that is on a map somewhere, and you can see the bubbles. They're getting closer and closer and closer to wherever you are in the world. You're my first degree isolation buddy, and it really brought it home to me how close it could be. Is there a sense of the virus there in Berlin at the moment? And tell me a little bit about who's in town and who's affected. Do you have a sense of that? Because we know ITB is a big show. There's 100,000 people in town, but there's more than just that happening. There's Travel Festival. There's the Travel Massive Forum. There's a lot happening. Can you give me a sense of what's happening in Berlin? And is there a sense that this virus has landed?
Oh, I see. Well, I mean, it's an interesting question because although I am actually in Berlin, I really haven't had any contact with anyone since Monday. I was able to. I've obviously been talking to people. So, in fact, I think some of the other guests here, like Natalia and Jean and Rick, could probably give you a better sense of what's going on here on the ground. Certainly, when we created the Stranded in Berlin kind of initiative, it was literally on the Saturday, afternoon when I realized that ITB had been cancelled, and we thought, wow, there's going to be hundreds of people who if they haven't cancelled their trip here, they're still going to be in Berlin, and people need a channel to be able to sort of support each other and connect and to be able to distribute information. So, we quickly set that up. And I had no idea that, I would end up being in a quarantine. So in fact, this Stranded in Berlin channel has sort of been my lifeline in terms of seeing what is, happening and going on. So, in terms of walking down the street, for example, I had to walk to the quarantine to the what's called the Gesundheit, which is the health authority. I had to go and get tested, which is an interesting experience because I was told that I had to be at least 2 meters away from anyone else. I had to I don't have a cough or anything, so I'm not showing any sort of symptoms, but obviously to be careful. So it was such a weird feeling. A woman walked up to me to ask me some questions, and I had to run away from her, because of the rules. But so that's really been my own experience. It's a surreal experience, and I think for me, it's really only just sort of sinking in, and I'm processing it.
Look, there's a lot happening. I mean, to be honest, Berlin is just, it's not a regional conference, although there is quite a lot of representation from, say, Italy and Spain and the UK at Berlin. It's a global conference. It unites the business. So you'll have people there from all over the world. We'll be talking to Rick Kazarian next from Thailand. He flew all the way in. And there's Jean as well, who's come all the way over from Melbourne. It's worth the haul because there's just so much happening there. Just before we go on, Ian, like your story is, of course, something that has me thinking, but what's the macro impact of what's happening here? Like the show is really just a symbol of the industry in one way. Some things are getting canceled, but that means that there are bookings getting canceled somewhere else. What's going to happen to the business over the next few months?
Good question. I mean, from anecdotal information and from what what a lot of our members are telling us, that are that have customers that and running tours, that there's a huge number of cancellations. I keep kind of asking people how they're going, and actually that's one important thing which I think that we all need to do is to ask each other how we're going. If you've got someone that that has a tour business or a startup or something and you haven't heard from them, just ping them and ask them, how they're doing. Because I think just even that, are you okay, gives that person a chance to sort of, express how they're feeling. And I think there's an emotional part of this. This isn't really just about a trade show or a festival. This is the tourism industry, which is at stake here. And that's the most important thing. So I think, at this sort of macro level, we have to be prepared for disruption. I think it's not going to be forever lasting, but I think that we have to prepare for it, and it's certainly starting to impact people.
Something I know I'll talk a little bit about to Chris in a moment. On a personal level, Ian, do you know how you're getting home?
That's a fantastic question. I really don't know. I mean, I think that
we are conditioned right now to having firm flight dates. That's the way airlines work.
Well, that's true. I mean, I didn't actually have a firm flight date out of Berlin. I was just sort of going to hang out, and then, I was probably going to come and visit you, and have a beer or something, or come up to Glasgow and see Chris. But I think for me now, to be really kind of a bit more serious, I think I have to think about, do I go back to Australia? Because from here on in, any kind of travel that I do, my travel insurance is not going to cover me should I be hospitalized or, things are cancelled or whatever. So that's something I have to kind of weigh in.
Wow.
But then the question is what might happen with certain travel restrictions and et cetera. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'm quarantined until the 14th of March. So if anyone's written me an email and they're waiting for me to reply, I'm definitely going to reply to you because I don't have anything else to do. I'll make that decision much closer to the date. There's no point for me to try to hypothesize how I can get back to Australia now. I think
all of a sudden things are more complicated, isn't it?
It's a lot more or if someone has a sailboat, then and they want to lend it to me, then I'll get on that.
I'll tell you what, if you're live streaming from that, Ian, I'll watch. That is one hell of a trip home. I think there's a Netflix miniseries in that as it is. I'm going to bring in Rick Gazarian, our chapter leader from Thailand, in just a second here. You're unmuted, Rick, and if you could switch on your video so the world can see just how handsome you are, we'll roll you in. But Rick is our chapter leader from Bangkok. He's a fellow Travel Massive podcaster. He has his own channel as well. You can find out more about Rick over on travelmassive.com. Global Gaz as well is on Twitter. Rick, you flew in from Bangkok to be in Berlin for the week. Can you give me a sense of what's happening from back home and what's happening to you in Berlin at the moment? Start maybe with the situation in Asia.
Yeah, so Kevin, thank you. I am based in Bangkok. And to put things in perspective, give or take 70 million people live in Thailand. And we have had 47 cases of coronavirus. And unfortunately, one person did pass away. So statistically, I mean, Thailand is a relatively safe place to be. Taking that into consideration, a lot of events are starting to get canceled these days, like the Wide Crew Muay Thai Festival just got canceled. All the full moon parties got canceled. A lot of bigger events are no longer on the calendar. In addition, news just got issued by the Thailand Authority of Tourism Authority of Thailand just an hour ago. And people coming from China, Macau, Hong Kong, Italy, and Iran will be subject to a 14-day mandatory quarantine when they arrive in Thailand. So everybody,
this is not even turn them back at the border. You land, you're in quarantine, that's it.
This is a press release that just came out under an hour ago.
Wow.
And this information is flip-flopping and changing frequently, as it is with many countries. So of course, if you are en route to Thailand, double, triple check what the latest situation is.
Absolutely. What we mightn't know straight away about the Chinese travel market is that their number one destination is Thailand. So the mobility of people naturally between the two markets is quite large. it's still, in a way, in spite of the tragedy there, it's still quite reassuring to see that it's so contained. Is the visa tool the way that they're managing the outbreak in Thailand? So are they
In
shutting the
terms of,
border to keep out the virus?
well, as of today, people and flights are still taking place from all those countries considered at risk. So
Okay.
that's not the case as far as I know.
On the ground, though, it is quite a leisure destination. There's some great conference business that makes it as far as Thailand as well, of course, but it is primarily a leisure destination. What are the tour operators doing on the ground there? What's happening?
Yeah, I mean, in short, everybody's hurting. Kind of at a macro level, Thailand's getting about high 30 million arrivals each year. And just as a subset of that, approximately 25% of those people are Chinese. So that 25% has almost been entirely wiped out. And then, of course, South Korea makes up another big portion. But speaking to some of my friends who are tour operators in Bangkok, local operators running like a lot of day tours, these guys, their business is really getting hurt. They are down 50, 60, 70%, from just last year. So they are hurting.
What's the first thing that's going to happen with them, Rick? Does that mean mass layoffs, canceling tours? What's the first thing that we're going to see happening here, and what's the long term?
Yeah, well, I mean, speaking to some of these tour operators, no one wants to lay off staff. That's, I think, kind of a last resort thing. But that's also going to differ company by company depending upon their financial health and how much they can sustain this, the slowdown in their business. For those who are in a stronger position, now is that kind of time to double down. This is when you're going to spend more time training your staff. This is going to be time where you're going to start creating more content, basically to get ready when things improve and when the tourists come back.
So it's almost like that when we might emerge in a month, we might emerge in 6 months, but when we emerge in Thailand, I get the impression that it'll be almost a different business, that there'll be new products, that it'll be an even more attractive market to visit.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, it's possible that some people who are in weaker financial situation, they might get weeded out, and those who are in a better position might be a little bit stronger after hopefully the coronavirus ends sooner than later.
So bring it a little bit closer to home there in Berlin. You flew in at the weekend, expecting ITB and everything else to be going ahead. What's it like in Berlin at the moment? Is it hysteria? Is it calm and collected? Is there a sense of solidarity among people that have flown in? Can you give me a sense of what I'm missing there?
Well, we're missing you, Kevin, but I flew in on Monday. So I flew from Bangkok to Moscow. I got off the plane in Moscow, checked my phone, and I was updated at that point that the Berlin Travel Festival had been canceled. I'd already known that ITB had been canceled. So I got here later, late Monday night to Berlin. And I would say, comparing it to Thailand, things are much more sedate and calm. And using face mask as a benchmark, you'll see tons of people wearing a face mask in Bangkok. I don't see anybody wearing a face mask here. So using that as a benchmark, it just seems people are not concerned, not worried at that level with the coronavirus here in Berlin.
So on a day-to-day level, I know this is the first March that I haven't been to Berlin in maybe 8 years. It feels strange being in Dublin. Maybe I should have flown out, but I know that by this stage in the week, my feet are in agony. I've been, it's been great high energy days, nonstop conversations, running around, there's almost a joy in the hustle. What's day-to-day like at the moment?
Well, this is my first ITB, so I can't really contrast that. There's definitely still some hustle, but I kind of feel like it's a low-key hustle.
What's your typical day then, Rick? I mean, what are you doing from noon to night? Are you finding new things to do, some new meetings to have, new opportunities? Or tell me a little
Definitely.
bit about what you were going to do and versus what you're doing.
Well, as an example, Ian referenced strandedinberlin.com a couple of times. And this has been a great resource where you can see what events, networking events, happy hours are taking place. So for instance, I have an upcoming trip to Africa. When ITB was on, I was hoping to meet with a lot of tour operators in Africa. But someone within the industry set up kind of an off-site event, and they gathered up 80 African tour operators who were already here for ITB. So there was a mini ITB Africa breakout. So I was able to go over there for the day, visit with a number of operators, build some relationships, and I've got some stuff to follow up on. So in some ways, I mean, there were less content creators there. I seem to be the only travel blogger there. So in some ways, you know, there was an advantage, I think, of the situation there.
Of weathering your ground. When you make it to the events, the stuff that's on the strandedinberlin.com, if you make it to those events, are they packed to the gills? Is it 10 or 20 people? What's the conversations like when you make it?
Yeah, so for we'll call it the mini ITB Africa breakout, I mean, there were 60, 70 operators who had set up there. And there were, you know, a couple of hundred people in addition to that milling about.
It's actually that's quite decent. I mean, look, it's not anything like you get on the show floor, but that's still it's still activity. That's still making the most of it, right? That's positive.
Yeah, so I would say activity, business is getting done, relationships are getting built.
So what's next for you, Rick? I mean, is there any direct impact on yourself? I mean, obviously you've got your show hitting the road as far as South Africa coming up, but has there been a direct impact on you? And how do you see the next 6 months for yourself?
Yeah, my major concern is I have a fair amount of trips set up, and I am constantly checking every single day whether these trips are going to be able to come to fruition. I.e., for instance, like, you know, I'm trying to go to Papua New Guinea, and, you know, depending on what country you're flying in from, there's a chance you might not be allowed into the country. So I'm checking with the airlines and the regulations and the rules every day to seeing what trips I'm still are gonna come to fruition and which trips are gonna be canceled due to the outbreak.
Well, Rick, we might come back to you in a minute for a little bit more commentary on Berlin. I want to switch over to another long haul traveler that made it as far as to Berlin there with you. Have you been able to spend some time with Jean Cheney, our chapter leader from Melbourne, while you're there?
I'm sure she would say too much time with me, but yes, I've been hanging out with Jean. We're in the same hotel, so we've been sharing some subways and Ubers together over the last couple of days.
So, Jean, thanks for joining us on this special broadcast. I have to introduce you as, of course, the chapter leader from Melbourne. There's a very obvious trip that you've made to get here. That's a 20-something, if you're flying expensive, 30-something, if you're not, hour trip on a plane to get there.
Yeah.
You're a blogger and content creator. So if there's a shrinkage in the travel business, there's a shrinkage in content creation almost. Can you tell me a little bit about what it's been like for you coming all this way and suddenly finding that the events are gone?
It's really interesting. There's no other way to put it. It's interesting to see how people are adapting and how they're evolving from this. Like a lot of people, content creators that were coming here, I was already on my way here. And you get that notification to say ITB's cancelled. You're like, well, you know, we'll still come along. And then you hear that the Berlin Travel Festival's cancelled, the Travel Massive Forums Festival's cancelled, this is cancelled, that's cancelled. Things that aren't cancelled or refundable, airfares, hotels. So yeah, we were still coming here no matter what. And a lot of other content creators are in the same boat, just still coming along because you're here anyway. And you know, the cancellation fees for some things, especially some of the low cost carriers, are higher than what people have paid for their airfares.
Wow. So in effect, you're almost stranded. If you think about it, you're either on the flight or you're you're kind of in a twist. So I would say, I don't know, Ian, if you have the slides to share, but I'll refer to something that Stefan Ekberg shared with us, or shared publicly on LinkedIn and Twitter earlier this week. You know, we've always had disruptions in the travel business, whether it was 9/11, SARS, MERS. There's always been challenges to travel as an industry systemically. From an Australian perspective, though, you've already had one, and now this compounds onto it. You've had bushfires lighting up satellite photos. We've been just watching that in awe from afar here, and all of a sudden coronavirus on top of it. How's the situation down under?
It's again, I'm just going to put it politely, it's really interesting. It's a really difficult, challenging time for content creators, tour operators within Australia. You know, first of all, you've got the bushfires that have stopped people traveling. One of the issues that we know with a lot of tour operators in Australia was that they're in areas that aren't affected by the bushfires, but people are still cancelling. People are still really worried about it.
So that would have been the inbound business to Australia would have been cancelling because of the bushfires already.
Inbound and even domestically.
Okay, wow.
So sort of like,
Wow.
you know, for us over Christmas and New Year, we're supposed to go different places domestically, couldn't actually get there because you go, I don't know when I get there what's going to be there, or if I'm just going to be turned around halfway. Road closures were happening, mass evacuations of tourist towns, especially along the beach, were sort of happening. So that was just, yeah, it's a massive hit to the tourism industry in Australia. A lot of people were really resilient. There's a few really great Instagram accounts that I'm going to drop here. One's called Shop With Them, and the other one is called Empty Esky. And these are both Instagram accounts that have just been created by people in the community to encourage people to travel domestically and to also show inbound tourism, when we had it, that there are all these amazing areas in Australia that are not affected by the bushfires, or areas that were affected by the bushfires that are now open for business again. So it's really encouraging people, like, you know, literally to get your esky. And if you don't want an esky, New Zealanders would call it a chili bin. I think Americans call it a cooler.
Okay.
Sorry, Kevin, I'm not sure what the Irish call an esky.
We would probably call it an ice box. It's a little
Yes.
plastic refrigerating thing that you can carry your beer into the heat of the desert and keep it cool. That's the way
Yes,
to look at
in
it.
all of that Irish desert out there. So the Australian tourism industry and the Australian communities really come together post the bushfires to get people to travel more domestically, you know, to book out the hotels. For instance, if you want to go to Kangaroo Island, which was affected by the bushfires, there's really cheap, I think it's boat fares I saw for about $15 Australian, so like $10 US, €10.
Wow.
You know, so the industries come together. Content creators and even like the small tourism boards have also come together and are creating amazing content around staycations, going to areas that have been affected by the bushfires. So that's like on a positive outlook of how things are going in Australia. The impact on travel inbound with coronavirus, you know, like a lot of places in the area, Australia tourism heavily relies on Chinese tourism, and that's just not happening at the moment. But we are seeing a lot more spend of domestic tourism because we've already gone through the bushfires, we've already got the content, it's out there. So people are thinking more about spending money locally, supporting small businesses, small tour operators, rather than like the big hotel chains and stuff like that.
Before we came on, I want to talk about T-Bex as well, because you mentioned it, but you were saying that, you know, digitally, traffic is down, and also, so that means that the ideation gesture for people, the instinct to search for hopefully your content is down. So people are just the overall inspiration spaces shrank as well. That seems to be evaporating. But you were saying that the Google algorithms were a little bit slow to keep up. Can you tell me what you meant by that?
Yeah, so the last large Google update that has hit a lot of travel content creators was November. and it hasn't quite picked up yet. Traffic to our sites, organic traffic is not quite coming up. A lot of the SEO bros are having, conniptions, they're based down there in Chiang Mai, trying to figure out how do we beat these algorithms. They're trying to, reassure their clients that they've got the magic keywords that will get that traffic back up. But we're just noticing that Google hasn't adapted as fast as previous large updates. So that combined with people just not searching for travel, people aren't looking for inspiration at the moment. We know that, we see the buying cycle, it's just slowing down. The media is just swamped with coronavirus information. There's a lot of debate going on about should I travel, shouldn't I travel? I, for one, am not creating any content about whether you should or shouldn't travel. I'm not a medical professional. I'm just someone who really likes travel and coffee. So, for us, Europe's great right now. But for other people, I just see a lot of mismanagement and miscommunication coming out from content creators who are trying to beat the Google algorithms by creating SEO-friendly content about coronavirus, about staying safe. My concern with that is just like, if you're not a medical professional, really, what the fuck are you doing? I'm sorry, swearing, Australian.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll edit that out in the podcast, Jean. We're all right. TBEX is cancelled. That was to be held in Sicily for Europe this year. That's a shock. When is that happening? It was early April usually, isn't it?
No, it was supposed to happen this weekend. So again, a lot of content creators are heading down there if they can. The local operators and sponsors that are still down there are saying if you are in the area in Sicily and you're turning up, they're still going to run the pre-TBEX trips, and they're also doing some amendments to some of the post-TBEX FAMIL trips. So they're still trying to make the best out of what's not a great situation. But again, it was sort of similar to a lot of these conferences. Cancellations are coming really late. But you can't do anything about that. It's no one's real fault. You can't sit here and lay blame because situation is just changing so fast for us. We're here every day checking our airlines, checking the Australian government website. We're supposed to be in Europe for another few weeks. We don't know how or if we can get home.
When you get home, look, there's a dot on the map in Victoria. There's a dot on the map in different parts of the country as well. It's arrived in Australia. And not to make too much light of it, Brian, I know you'll get a kick out of this, but whenever we have a storm warning in Ireland, there's a run on the supermarkets for toast, for like bread for making toast, and for tea bags. For whatever reason, people just go crazy stockpiling. What seems to be the trend at the moment is that this has inflated to a ridiculous amount of money locally. It can't even be bought on Amazon. It's gone crazy. Have people lost the run of themselves locally back home? Are they keeping cool?
People are losing their mind. Toilet paper is now a commodity in Australia. Like, for instance, I live in a town that's an hour outside of Melbourne. It's a fairly big town. We have a full-size supermarket. They've just emailed me this morning through my rewards program, asking me not to go buy toilet paper. They're saying to people like, can you please not come in and panic buy? Can you actually think about individuals in society, like in the community, who don't have a lot of disposable income, or maybe, the elderly who are relying on carers to take them shopping, who actually, you can't get toilet paper. Our friends are sending us photos. There's no toilet paper, there's no milk, no pasta, no flour. It's just mayhem. And the really funny thing is, in Australia, we make our own toilet paper. We have our own production system.
All right. On that note, I have to wrap up. We've a lot to fit into the hour. Jean, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to bring in Natalia Smolenskaya from, it's a startup based in Vietnam called Secret Eats. And like ourselves in City Hook, the role of Berlin as a way to read the temperature of the business, as a way to get new connections, as a way to get to accelerate business. It's vital. It's like oxygen. Natalia, you're based in Berlin at the moment. You came all the way over. What's it been like for you?
Well, yes, I came all the way from Vietnam. I was traveling, first of all, for Berlin Travel Festival, not for ITB. I was planning to visit it as well, and I had a few meetings scheduled, but ITB was not as important to me. I've been there before, and well, I was
the whole business is in town, and it's just electric. There's so much happening, and
Yes.
everybody's there to meet. And that was it for you. There was so many meetings set up.
Yeah, so for Berlin Travel Festival, I was supposed to be speaking there, and I wanted to tell as many people as possible about Secret Hits and our experiences and how we're going to develop, make some connections with future partners, etc. So yes, it didn't happen. But well, also, as Rick told, we were in the same situation with Rick because he was flying from Thailand and through Moscow, and I was flying from Vietnam through Moscow. And I got a message from Ian when I was on my layover in Moscow and my flight was about to depart to Berlin. Everything is canceled. You might reconsider your travel plans. And I'm like, too late, I'm coming.
Did you though? Was there a moment where you went to the airline counter and said, "Is there anything you can do for me? Can I turn around?" Was there any?
I kind of realized that it was too late, but maybe if I got that message before I took off from Vietnam, I probably could have reconsidered it.
It's easier at that point. Natalia, tell me a little bit about what you do, because you're almost the poster child as a technology company for what's happening during this crisis. Can you tell us a little bit about Secret Eats? Just give us the 20-second
Of course,
pitch.
happily. Secret Eats is actually not a new brand that was started 8 years ago in South Africa, but as a pop-up dining concept. Just a bit over a year ago, me and the founder of Secret Eats partnered in Vietnam. And I started taking care of the experiences because I've been working in travel industry before. So we decided to refocus to travelers. And basically just over a year now, we've been running cocktail and dining experiences in Vietnam. Now it's still operating in South Africa, but as pop-up dining. And we are planning to expand to other countries in future. That's why connections to us were very important.
A lot of your business would have been inbound tourism, whether it's in South Africa or in Vietnam. So your driver was inbound, in a way, it was inbound flights.
Yes.
So if the numbers landing go down, your revenue goes down. That's a direct impact. How are you going to get through this? And is there alternatives for you at the moment? And then how do you see the future?
Well, first of all, well, that might be a good thing that we are new in running the experiences because we don't have much revenue yet. So we don't have much to lose. And we are still developing. And anyway, as long as we stay positive and as long as we focus on business development, on strategy, on new partnerships, that's fine for us. So, because if we grow too fast and if we get too many bookings very soon, it will distract us from the business development. So actually, it's not a bad situation for us.
So it's not too bad. How long do you see it lasting in Vietnam? What's your assessment of this impact at the moment?
Well, I've been talking to a few colleagues from different travel companies and DMCs, and they predicted the effect to last until the end of the year, because lots of people planning their holidays in advance, especially with DMCs, their clients booking holidays very much in advance. For us, not, but well, it might last for a while.
How is the impact on the ground in Vietnam? You were talking a little bit about the visa restrictions, and I know I put the question to Rick as well. The visa restrictions are a way to control the outbreak in a way, because if you're not letting anybody in, if you restrict mobility, people won't meet one another. You won't come in contact within those 2 meters to 6 feet of somebody that may be carrying. What's that like in reality for you guys?
Well, yeah, Vietnam restricted some flights from a few countries, including China, South Korea, which are actually 2 major tourist markets in Vietnam. And then now also they're not issuing visas to Italians and Iranians. So yes, it is kind of tough. Well, I myself, for example, going to travel next week back to Vietnam from Berlin. And Berlin is now number 6 in the list of coronavirus cases. So I'm not sure if they'll put me under quarantine or something else. I don't know. So, well, yeah, we feel it. And like, that's why lots of people are not, and they know they might stay in the quarantine or might be turned back. So they're not traveling.
I tell you, you have a positive outlook on this. I admire the energy. But do you feel like you're going to end up before you fly? Is there a worry that you won't fly, number one, but then before you set out, are you kind of canceling your next 2 weeks just in case you're in an apartment somewhere without internet? What are you going to do?
Well, it will be an interesting experience. I'll see, because yeah, my flight is next Wednesday. I'll take a look on what's happening in Vietnam on Wednesday morning before flying. If Berlin, if Germany is one of the countries which will have to go under the quarantine. And well, if I have to go in the quarantine, I'm sure I'll be fine with that. Anyway, we are not busy at the moment with bookings, so that's okay. I'll have something else to do for 2 weeks.
Very good. While we have you, and just before we sign off, you're our last speaker who's currently in Berlin. What does it feel like in Berlin at the moment? Are people, like Rick said, walking around without the masks on? Does it feel like there's something going wrong? And then, are you kept busy? Are you in enough meetings to make the trip worthwhile for you?
Yeah, well, it feels totally fine. No one is wearing masks. I only saw probably a few tourists wearing masks yesterday. I was told by a local friend, though, that locals started using public transport less than normal, and they use cars more often. That's why there is more traffic now.
Wow.
But I personally did notice this because I don't live here. But yeah, I did notice that public transport was not busy. Yeah, until she told me that, I didn't realize that. Well, I've been busy. I was surprised actually, because again, thanks to the Stranded in Berlin community, there have been a lot of events happening. And instead of being stuck in one place, I've been running around town for the last few days, because there were meetups in one area. And for example, there was a sustainable tourism meetup. There was an impromptu mini ITB. There were a few networkings. We caught up with Rick and Jin as a little travel massive team. So it's been very useful. And well, because yes, of course, all those events, they're smaller in numbers, but I have a chance to talk to more people and get to know them better and make more personal connections. So it's actually not too bad.
Natalia, thanks for joining us. If you've just tuned into this live stream, this is Stranded in Berlin. It's a huddle, a meetup of a couple of our Travel Massive members and other special guests from around the world who are either in Berlin or not in Berlin for the ITV and other travel activity that's there. We're talking about the impact of COVID-19, the coronavirus, on the travel business, and how we can look through it, how we can see around it, how it's impacting us, and how we can get out of it as quickly as possible. I'm going to introduce the next speaker. It is Chris Torres, my counterpart, a travel massive leader from Glasgow, of course. But Chris runs a digital marketing agency and is the author of this book. I don't know if I've centered it properly on the frame, How to Turn Your Online lookers into bookers. Chris, I want to talk a little bit maybe about what it's been like from your perspective. Maybe talk about the digital first and we'll talk about the physical next. How has COVID-19 affected digital for tourism?
Good question. In terms of what I've seen from our own customer base and some others in the industry, the only real change we've seen at the moment is the type of content they're putting out there or who they're marketing to. So no, we have some companies that we've been speaking to who have been putting out information about the virus and taking precautions on that and what it can do for their own insurance policies in terms of tours being cancelled, that type of thing? Can people postpone them, etc.? But although some other companies don't want to even mention coronavirus whatsoever because they feel it's promoting the hysteria, if you can call it as such. Whereas I'm more inclined to say, well, make your customers install a bit of trust in your own brand by saying, well, this is how we're dealing with it, this is what we're doing. This is, if you do have a tour with us and it does get cancelled, don't worry, we'll put it on another date, that type of thing. So I think there needs to be some messaging from, and a positive messaging from tour operators and activity providers around it, and rather than just ignoring it personally. But in terms of the digital side of things, what we're finding is more and more people and more operators who we deal with on a daily basis are targeting more people inbound rather than outbound sort of tourists. More and more people are choosing not to fly out or book in advance because of the virus. There's, and we mentioned this earlier as well before we came on there, is what I'm finding is people aren't, or tourists aren't booking to go to destinations purely for the fear of the virus. That's not the main issue. The main issue is the fear of losing money and losing out on the bookings they've made, losing out on the hotels, losing out on the flights. In the UK, we've already seen the effects of some of the airlines, etc. So that's what people are really afraid of, and it's getting that more positive message out there, and it's marketing more for a local market rather than an outbound market, if that is your market. Think about the products and think about what you can do within your own destination to try and drum up that extra business and support the local community as well.
The situation for people that know ITB know that there is sometimes an inbuilt partner conference for it. Arrival is the partner conference at ITB. They run a separate track. It's almost like you could be almost oblivious to ITB at Arrival even, but it's a major conference for them in Europe. Yeah. That was cancelled. Poor Doug Quinby on LinkedIn. I was sad reading his post, but it's another one of those situations where they had to cancel. Yeah. But like we mentioned at the outset, you know, this wasn't a systemic, a single point of truth for cancellations. Hotels didn't get the message, airlines didn't get the message, and for a lot of people, the disruption wasn't just the travel; it was the hotels. The policies are wildly different. People weren't accommodated, people weren't refunded. What's your perspective on that?
No, I'm one of those customers. The hotel I was staying at have a 7-day cancellation policy. I was told the day before I was about to fly out that Arrival was cancelled, which I do not blame any of the events cancelling or anything like that. No, it was all government driven. It was all obviously taking precautions on that. But I understand from a business point of view why some businesses will still demand the money for bookings that have been made, because obviously that's going to be a huge loss to them as well, especially if you have lots and lots of people coming over for a conference. No, I was expecting to lose a deposit, for example, but obviously I'm not going to name anything, and this is more to be a positive spin, but some of the hotels, because they have 7-day cancellation policies, are taking 100% of the money from the guests who don't arrive, which I don't agree with. It doesn't really install customer loyalty for anyone wanting to come back to that particular place or any of those sort of places. So I think there needs to be some sort of I think there needs to be some sort of more positive spin on it in terms of that side of things to make the industry better as a whole, and to install trust in the customers as well again.
We see the difference in what Gene was talking about in, I'm going to forget the name of the island, Gene, I'm sorry, but you know, there was a unity, a collaboration with the locals there that they all kind of tied together, and they put on special fares for the boat trips and everything else, and that when they got there was still something to do, and it was for locals. So there isn't that sense yet. There isn't that sense even of leadership in accommodation to say that, look, you know, we should be doing this. There hasn't been a conference to say we should be doing this. There hasn't been any thought leadership put out there to say we should be doing this. And my worry is, and maybe you could give me your thoughts on this, look, we're maybe inside the business, or at least we have a perspective of, look, we know what it's like to make it work. Somebody coming back from their investment in leisure travel for the year, or their investment in corporate travel for the year, you know, some people just like, and maybe some people just like to complain, I don't know. But, you know, the average consumer may not be as accommodating or as affording as we are. How do we, from an influencer perspective, maybe attack or rise to the challenge of negative commentary around bad experiences that this causes?
It is a hard one, though. If a customer has that type of experience, they are going to shout about it. As everyone here knows, more people and tourists and customers are more likely to leave a negative review rather than a positive one, and that's just the nature. That's just human nature. So the only, whether it's a hotel, whether it's an airline, whether it's a tour operator, you do need to show that you are trying to be as accommodating as you can, obviously without damaging your own business. And the only way you can really do that is by putting out really good, meaningful content. How you're going to promote that online, whether it's through Facebook or your website or anything like that. You just need to put a positive spin on it. No, what's happening here in the UK with Flybe, a lot of the airlines are now trying to, for free or for very low cost, arranging flights for the people who are stranded. Anyone who was working on that airline are getting free flights on other airlines. No, they are doing the right things. So hotels, accommodations, or any other business should be doing a sort of similar thing if they can, to try and say, okay, this is what's happened in the industry. This virus is going to last for the rest of the year. No, there's no two ways about it. We're going to feel the effects for this for the rest of the year. So I'll be very surprised if any events happen this year at all, to be honest.
So you think it's going to hit the season peak? It's going to kill our July and
I think
August?
so, yeah. I think it's just going to, it's going to continue to spread. I think it'll get worse before it gets better. Okay. So the only way you're going to sort of get around that is to try and put more of a positive spin on what you can do digitally. So I know Ian's raising his hand there.
So digital is the means of communication, of course, getting the right content out there, but of course it's maybe a time to go back to the whiteboard to think about what we're going to do in the meantime. It's we're in this for 6 months from the sound of things.
Exactly. And think about opportunities you can create for your business in the meantime. Well, let's say to target the local market, market to them, see what you can do, create new products, even if it's something completely removed from what you normally do. If you want your business to survive, if you are at that stage where you think things might not go too well, you have to adapt. It's the tourism industry is all about adapting to whatever challenges are thrown to you, and if you don't adapt, you're not going to survive. So adapt and you'll thrive. So
Chris, I think that if we were talking under any other context other than the COVID-19 outbreak, that is still absolutely valid advice. You always have to adapt and travel, because either you're doing something right and somebody's about to copy you, or you're doing something wrong and you're about to go extinct. I think, some of the MBA style guys will call it innovation. It's just the reality of the business. You're constantly adapting. And I think that the digital channel gives us the first line of defense against at least the brand deterioration. And I think there's something that we could learn from that. Chris, I'm going to thank you for joining us and move on to my next guest on the panel today. Brian Marinan is another fellow Irishman. He's not in the same place as me. He's in a different office, but he's joining us after coming from Berlin. You've been there for the week, Brian. I'm going to introduce you as a venture capitalist of sorts. You're an early stage startup support. You run an incubator called Propeller in Shannon here in Ireland. Do you want to talk just in 20 seconds about what you do and what you were hoping to achieve while you were in Berlin?
Sure, Kevin, good to see you. So Berlin for us is always an opportunity to actually meet interesting people. I mean, that's the key to it. It's trying to get as many of those kind of energetic conversations where you talk about exciting new things that are happening, and then focus on new startups that could potentially be the next startup to disrupt the industry. So that's what it's always about for us. Unlike you, I come away from the weekend both exhausted but also energized, and really understanding, the fantastic people that are in this space. And obviously that's taken a little bit of a hit this week. I think it's really important to us that we remember that this is temporary, that we've been through these before, and we will come out the other side. And it's about those behaviors that we want to encourage in the meantime now. But we are going to go through pain for the next several months.
You're in the business of risk, Brian, and your stats will be different, but in general, most investments fail. you know, that's how we have to look at businesses. Even the investments that the large corporates in the travel business are making, you know, just a random kayak will invest in something, it may fail. We mightn't hear about it. Google are very public about what they are sunsetting, you know, what they're switching off. The Trips app was one just recently, you know, but you're in the business of risk. And when you're talking to a startup founder, whether it's by chance or at an event, how do you read their business model, given that there's going to be something like this or the next outbreak or the next disruption to the business coming around the corner? How do you filter, or how do you read for risk?
Constantly. So I guess from our perspective, startups, you're right? The vast majority of startups fail. And we're in a position where we're looking for, yes, an idea that's interesting, but ideas often change over the course of a journey. More often to us, it's the market opportunity and the team that's behind it. So you're always looking at what are the people like in the team, how interesting they are, their kind of knowledge and experience, and then how resilient they are in terms of how they're going to deal with these challenges, because this is just one that a startup will face. I'm certain that startups are going to go out of business because of this, and part of that is because startups don't have a huge amount of cash. They can't wait those few months, the 6 months that other larger organizations can take the hit on. They just don't have that amount of cash and will have to go out of business. But there are others that will adapt and change, and this creates interesting new opportunities for lots of different startups as well. We actually talked to an Italian startup this morning that was about to launch at the Fashion Week in Milan. That's obviously not going to go ahead. But once we actually did a little bit of brainstorming, there's really interesting opportunities for them to do something quite viral and create a different kind of splash. Media, when they're talking about everything that's horrible about coronavirus at the moment, really want to hear a good news story as well. And if you can come up with a novel way of approaching that, that's going to create a huge advantage and get you publicity that you would not be able to get in a normal market environment when you're just yet another startup out there. So I'd be encouraging people to really look at this in a new way. We're seeing interesting companies coming through that could really take advantage of this. There's an Irish company that you and I are very aware of, Mana, who are doing drone food delivery. I mean, this is the perfect opportunity for them to come out with a press release around how you don't have to touch anyone to get your food. And they're actually launching this month in one of the university campuses in Ireland, where they're delivering Ben & Jerry's ice cream to students as if they need more. Back in my days anyway. And then we're seeing interesting companies that could take advantage, like Set2, which is an insurance company that allows you to create really adaptive insurance products. We've seen the insurance companies' share prices increase quite a bit. Zoom added 2 million. We're on them at the moment. They added 2 million customers over the course of the last month. Their share price has gone up by 40%. It's the biggest jump since they went public last April. So companies like that can take advantage. And then people who are looking at travel in a slightly different way, you know, road trippers, road.travel, those kind of companies. Would people be more amenable to a road trip where they're just in a car with their loved ones and then stopping off in places? Can people like Airbnb take more advantage of this over hotels? Would people be more comfortable staying in kind of their own space as opposed to a big community environment like a hotel? So there's lots of different opportunities there that could come out of this. And I think it's just how people look at this and the resilience in terms of finding those opportunities rather than thinking everything's going to die. And actually, if everything's going to die and it's that bad, we may as well travel and see the world while it does.
Talking a little bit about best reason in the world to travel, we're all doomed. So that's maybe the leisure aspect of it. Brian, this is going to, like, you know, Zoom shares going up are really just an indication that, look, meetings just have to happen. There's something magical that happens on the shop floor. Like, we all come for the big spiel and the event itself, but really there's a magical connection between two people that you can only get by being in the room. There's a serendipity element. There's the random conversation around the meeting. that'll let something out and help you do better business. But thinking about the corporate market, what's your view on that? Are people going to survive? So is the corporate market going to survive? Like the big four, are they going to see a downturn? How do you read it?
Yeah, no, I think we're definitely going to see a hit there. It's going to impact on travel companies. There's companies like Nestle, which is like 300,000 people who've said all corporate travel is now gone. Same with Amazon. They're just stopping it for this period of time. We're seeing internal corporate conferences for Google, Xerox, United, Amazon. All of these people who would have major internal events have just said, actually, we're not doing it this year. And so those kind of things are certainly going to take a hit. I mean, when we talk about how we engage at conferences, when I say I like to meet people, the key thing behind that is I like to have interesting conversations with people. I like to broaden my thinking. And if you're not going to events, you're not going to get that in the same way. You don't build trust with people. So that's definitely more of a challenge. People are going to have to be much more deliberate in how they're actually engaging with their customers, with their colleagues, and really kind of focus down into, are you creating time now that you're not going to these events to actually deepen those relationships and do interesting things to these people. But we're definitely going to see a huge hit in corporate travel. And if you look at, from me, I'm always looking at it from an investor and startup perspective. Significant number of the startups that have been invested in over the past few years have actually been business travel related startups. And they're going to have to think quite differently about how they're going to get through this period and create interesting alternatives for these organizations.
So one last note, there's only so far into a conversation about travel you can get in Dublin without, this is Aviation City here. There's quite a lot of airline activity here. All the leasing is based in, quite a lot of the leasing, I should say, not all, but is based in Dublin and Ireland. What's the feeling on the ground around the impact on aviation globally? You know, my gut says it's down. The signals are beginning to get a little bit clearer. Flybe was a signal the other day, but probably unrelated, but this is certainly a trigger. What have you picked up?
Yeah, it's not just your gut. It's definitely down. So we're looking at data from a variety of different sources now, which is showing that there's quite a significant impact. The GDS's Amadeus and Sabre have said anywhere between 10 and 15% drop in February alone. We're expecting that to increase in March. Israel immediately just cut all flights to Italy when or from Italy. They just weren't allowing them into the country when the coronavirus hit there. It's a very interesting perspective on it. But then we are seeing people like Ryanair saying that they're going to significantly cut all traffic to and from Italy over the period of the next month.
What we mightn't understand, for everybody in the call, the largest airline in Italy is actually Ryanair. It's and for them to say that that's a huge signal.
It's huge.
It's massive.
Yeah. Lufthansa have said they're going to cut costs by 10% in all their kind of pipeline projects. Their material costs they want to cut down by 20%. So they're actively cost cutting. You have Cathay Pacific, who have asked their staff to go on 3 weeks of unpaid leave. So significant impact. Phil Seymour, who's the CEO of the International Bureau of Aviation, wrote in the Wall Street Journal that he expects a 100 billion hit to the industry. And to put that in perspective, Kevin, the industry was expected to make a 30 billion profit this year. So we're expecting the industry as a whole to make a 70 billion loss.
We'll be watching the UNWTO stats carefully, the IATA conferences as well. That's going to be the
absolutely. I think IATA have just revised up they said it would be about 30 billion the hit about 2 weeks ago. They've just revised that up to 113. So it's pretty significant. I think
that's quite a hit. Yeah,
we are going to see more in terms of Flybe, and I think we're going to see more governments as well bailing out national airlines. So it's going to have quite a big economic impact from that perspective.
Brian, we're going to get back to you in another minute. We're going to call on all of our speakers to give the last word. But for the time being, thank you for joining us on the Stranded in Berlin panel, hosted from Dublin, from Berlin, and from around the world. Our last scheduled speaker was somewhere in the throes of high-speed rail, bulleting across Germany when we were doing our early call-in. Earlier, we had the curtain call. Sandra Weihnacht, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I hope you can hear me too.
Brilliant. Sandra, thanks for joining us. It's good to have you. Where exactly in the world are you at the moment?
Well, so I don't know if you can actually, people can see me or not. I have the video on.
We can see you.
I have a little special effect going on.
Yeah.
Meaning, I'm not where you think I'm at, or from the picture. So this is where I'm going to take the sunglasses off. I discovered that Zoom conference has the virtual background, so I'm going to take that off. So this is where I'm really at. A lovely train station in Germany, actually Bamberg, one of the really pretty cities, not the train station. And that brings me to my point. There's so much strange coverage situations. We have all this power nowadays to make believe how things are. And I was in Italy last week by choice, because I wanted to see what's going on, because that's our #1 destination. And it is heartbreaking to see the effects, mainly for everybody over there, but also for us. We're a small US tour operator specializing in group tours, mainly students. Spring break trips are coming up, and people are fearful to go. People are fearful to be quarantined coming home. But my experience with the hotels, unfortunately, and the airlines is not a good one. Very little amends.
Now, Sandra, just to set the context a little bit, your #1 destination for your activity is Italy. You're an inbound,
in 2020.
Yeah,
yes,
you're an inbound operator for Italy. So if people are suddenly afraid to fly into Italy, you're into troubled territory straight away. What's the #1 impact for you? I know you were there last week just to get a sense of what's happening on the ground, but can you give us a little sense of how you've been impacted yourself?
Sure. Well, I tell you, we're not just an inbound tour operator for Europe, for Italy. It's for Europe. So Europe is a specialty destination, but Italy is super attractive, very sexy, and it's my favorite destination too.
Oh,
so I flew from Charlotte. I flew from Charlotte into Rome. There were no people with masks on my flight. There were very few people with masks in the airport. There was a short moment of temperature control as I passed towards customs and immigrations. The biggest miracle for me was that I got my luggage in 10 minutes. If you've flown through Fiumicino before, it's a miracle if you get your luggage, but 10 minutes, never had that before.
Wow.
So, yeah.
No comment. From that perspective, though, what are the numbers? You don't have to go into very specifics. It's really just the trend and how you're coping. What's the impact for you? What's happening next? And
I don't even know where to start, because next for us is, the main reason I went to Italy is to put the final touches on a tour that we're preparing for 350 people from California, mainly students, a lot of families. And we believe in, taking the roads less traveled, work with local hotels. We do work with some major chains where we have larger groups as well, especially for the students. And yeah, I can't tell you what this is going to mean for us, because most likely this group is not going to go, or the majority of them is not going to go.
Wow.
But the hotels, especially the big ones, and I'm going to use names, I'm going to say the Marriott group, are not going to issue any kind of refunds. I've even gotten an email today where they say, look, we're not even going to postpone it, because you know what, everything is fine, and you know it because you were there. And I'm like, yeah, I was there, but I'm also not a mom that sends a kid overseas for the first time alone, not knowing if that student is going to be quarantined at the airport in Italy, up on coming home, cannot go to school, cannot do exams. I get both sides, but here we are in the middle now, a small business built up over years, specializing in group travel, and we can't just cancel the tour. We can't give people money back that we've already spent, that nobody's going to give us back. We're going to try as hard as possible. Like my husband and I, we own the company, so we're taking us out of the equation, but there's staff to be paid.
Yeah.
And
like for a tour operator, there's hundreds of moving parts. There's hundreds of moving parts, and bringing it all together is the magic. if some
We
parts
try.
of that start to fail, or if there's a negative consequence, the fallout can be quite serious. I mean, it could be that in a year's time, we're all having a conversation about the role of the, every country has a different one, the ATOL guarantee, the ATOG, whatever guarantees on our travel agencies and tour operators. The premiums could skyrocket for travel agency
And we're already
insurance.
in a high risk, working with students who are in a high risk bracket for our errors and emissions, for everything. And, travel insurance, we tell everybody to get travel insurance, but so far, until there's a real complete ban to go, none of that helps. There's right now, there's really nobody that can help our travelers if they decide not to go, to recoup their investment. We have families of 6, of 8 going on this trip.
And these might be once in a lifetime opportunities, and I think
Yes,
that's
for the
role of
majority, it
inbound
is once in a
sometimes, is to do
lifetime
that.
opportunities.
Yeah, that's quite. You're really in the thick of it, Sandra. I can hear the emotion in your voice. It's.
And I love America. I've married an American. I have an American daughter. But if there's one thing that's really, really scary about America, it's the culture of suing. And I live a very modest lifestyle, but this could mean if people insist that we have to reimburse them for those trips, there goes my little house, because everything I worked for.
Sandra, how long do you expect the fallout from this to be, or is it already fallen?
There's good news. So we have another group, and again, I understand nobody knows what happens tomorrow. I all wish we have a crystal ball, and I wish I could promise people you're not getting sick. I wish I could make any kind of guarantees. All I know is I was fine, people there were fine, and everybody hopes people come and continue. And but there's no guarantees, and we can't, not ensure people won't be super safe and nothing happens when they go home. But on a positive spin, I have another group traveling in June, and they had a meeting last night to talk about it, and we said, you guys are a little further away, we can still not take it, we can still give you, I don't know, 50% off what we have, numbers are not my thing, we can give you a lot of money back. And the outcome was so that the majority said, you know what, no, it's okay, we're going to go further. And we understand that if in June or right before June we hear that we can't go, we understand you can't pay us back, except for the tips, all this little stuff that we don't pay out beforehand. So that there's a lot of positive, and that includes, older people that write on Facebook and say, Sandra, stay strong, we're coming, we're going, it's okay.
There's I love to hear that kind of solidarity. If there was a magic wand, and it's a question we'd planned for all of the panel at the end, and I think it's a nice way to bring it up. If you had a magic wand, Sandra, I mean, given the situation that we're in, and we're all struggling through it in our own way, what's the one thing you wish we could change, whether it's public perception, whether it's better information, whether it's stronger insurance policies, whether it's something unreasonable and rational, like, more level-headed parents? I don't know, but what is the one thing you'd like to change here? What would be the one magic spell we could cast on this to help make it easier?
The magic spell is to get rid of the gray, to make it black and white. As much as I love gray is one of my favorite colors, but right now what I need black and white. Not the black one says I'm not going to give you your money back, but it's a real decision. Okay, you know what? Let's stop travel to Italy from America. If that's an official announcement, then we have a chance to fight for our clients' money. Or an official one that says, you know what? It's super safe to go. So for me, clarity, clear answers. I think that would make such a difference, but I know that's wishful thinking.
That's the oracle we've been wishing for in a number of situations on this call. If things were synchronized, things would be a little bit easier to cope with, I think. If the hotels were aware of a giant show being cancelled in town, it just makes so much sense. And for yourself as well, that if it stops, at least it'll be restarting again and you can work on that date. But in the meantime, you're still stuck in the middle.
We
trying
are.
to figure out how do that's not really happening, and I'm reading that mightn't happen, and this might. Again, my heart goes out to you, Sandra.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I think you're a story of resistance, and I think we'll be watching.
I love this industry. I love this job. I love my clients, and I love for them to keep going and be safe.
Well, look, let's wrap up there maybe with you, Sandra. I'd love to, and do chime back in on this if you want, but I did want to wrap this up with a question to everyone. So we'll be looping back through the panel, and my challenge to everybody is to not say the following sentence. I agree with the other guy. So let's see if what we can do that's slightly original. But we're in a moment where this isn't the first crisis in the business. In the case of Gene, we were talking about, this is the second crisis at the same like indirect sequence, where we have the bushfires and corona outbreak. But what we have is constant disruption in travel, and either you need to add it manually to keep yourself sharp, or you need to constantly react to something. 9/11, SARS, MERS, there's so much that constantly hits us. It's a time where it's worth reaching out to anybody, whether it's you're in an accountancy practice, reach out to your friend in the travel business, see if there's something that we can do. But if there was one thing that we could ask everybody at the end, it's what could we do as a business together to support one another? And for no other reason than you're first in my list, Brian, maybe we could start with you. What's the one thing that we could do as a business to support one another?
Okay, so I think there needs to be unity around anything that can help to slash costs. So anything that we can do to actually bring down those typical things that hit us in the meantime. And I think if we do that hotel by hotel or company by company, that's going to be a big challenge. I think if we come together on that, then we have a much better chance of those things actually happening. IATA showed it recently when they talked about airline slots, for example, where if you don't fill a certain amount, you lose your airline slot, and they're trying to stop that from happening for this year because it's
so to pause on the usual commercial conversations that we're having, work towards a common position and get the costs down.
Yeah, and then support yourselves in being creative around developing new things, exciting tourists in different ways. Focus on a different segment of tourism where you can actually collaborate and create new experiences that are really exciting.
Natalia, what's your feeling at this stage? How can we support one another?
Well, I think we should all, as travel industry professionals, we should all stay positive. We should not create panic ourselves because our customers, they are already panicking. And if us who organize their trips and take care of them are also in panic, that only makes it worse. So I think, well, if we need support from each other, we can always talk. It's good to have meetings and get together, but we should not panic ourselves.
We should not panic one another. For yourself, Jean, having also come all the way over to Berlin to join the festivals upon festivals in town, seeing what you've seen, how can we help one another?
Certainly from the content creator point of view, it's time to collaborate and support one another. It's time to be reading your fellow content creators' works, sharing it with your audience. You know, I like to say, don't be a dick, like stop trying to charge one another for these things. Literally, like I've got a thread on my Facebook page at the moment where I'm regularly sharing other people's content, you know, just saying to them like, hey, get off, you know, the newspapers. I don't want to name any of the bad ones in case I insult more people today. You know, stop reading all the negativity, actually read, you know, some fun things, some really positive things. And for those of us that are, you know, stuck in places, it's really time to diversify your income streams. It's a great time to upskill at the moment if you can't travel. You know, certainly for people who cancelled coming to ITB or they've cancelled their TBEX tickets, you've now got a week free. Like you can sit around, I say you get half a day to sulk, and then the rest of the time it's like, put your big girl undies on and let's start getting things moving again.
As the expression goes, never waste a crisis, I think. Rick, I'm going to bring you in. What are your thoughts on this? How can we help one another?
Yeah, well, one thing I think is we should all be looking for facts, not rumors, not innuendos. So let's look at the facts and trusted sources of information and not panic when we should not be panicking. And just to, I think, echo some of the previous comments, whether it's actually support emotionally or with great information or great resources or great advice, go out to your networks of your peers, go out there, support them, again, emotionally or with advice and tips and advice to how they can improve their business or stay above ground during this time period.
I'm going to loop around. There's a couple of questions that Maria sent me here during the call. We'll try and get to them towards the end. For now, I'm just going to stick with this topic. Second to last, Chris. We've heard some good ideas there about how to support one another, whether it's the solidarity and emotional support, the data, never waste the crisis, and so on. What's your gut?
I think solidarity is a must. I think businesses should be speaking to other businesses in their area, competitors as well. They'll start sharing the workload, sharing the costs, help each other out. I know of a number of operators already who are helping each other with customers to try and use the same buses and the same things to take more people out on tour, just to share that workload and that cost across both companies, so it's not going to be quite as expensive for them. So it's just solidarity. It's the only way you're going to get around this. It's helping other people within the industry, and even meeting your competitors. No, get together, band together, see how you're going to get through this, and market appropriately as well.
And just to, I know there are a lot of chapter leaders on the call, yourself included, Chris. You know, I think the Travel Massive meetups are one of the better ways to connect and to do that. You know, they're not very high ceremony events. They're regular and frequent. There's something on in every city, generally in the world, including Dublin, Glasgow with yourself, Melbourne with Jean, and Bangkok with Rick. And I know I'm going to miss Hoi An, of course, for Natalia. But you know, there is a way to express, to assert that solidarity to one another. Sandra, how do you feel about this? I know I springboarded off that topic with yourself to bring it up, but like, and I described it as the magic wand, but what would you do? What would you like to see in the business as overall that we could do to help one another out?
So, you know, from coming from, you know, in America, a small business is still like a medium. It's not a mom and pop shop. It's, you know, a legitimate business with employees and everything like that. However, what I think is missing in our world is the support from the big ones to the small ones to the little ones. You know how on Shark Tank they say, I'm going to crush you like the cockroaches that you are. Unfortunately, that's kind of like what's happening. And we're getting information, well, this tour company is going to refund everything but $600. Yeah, that tour company also is not going to pay their staff on the ground. They haven't ticketed yet, and they're not going to pay the hotels until the tour is over. And in this case, they're not going to pay them at all. So for me, what I would love to see is that we all can at least be nice and civil to each other in the situation, and not like, yay, now we got a chance to take your clients for the future. Yeah, because that sucks. I mean, that is just, there's the market. We want people to travel. There's so many travelers out there in this world, and every single company gives something unique. So let them be.
I think you've raised an important point there. There is going to be a little bit of that, and I think we should be on the lookout for opportunists. And, you know, we mightn't be able to stop them, but I say we should at least make them very visible when we think they're doing something that's a little bit underhanded. Ian, I want to loop you back in at the end. Maria, if you don't mind, there's been a couple of great questions here. I'm just going to read them out. I won't get to them though, because what I'd love to do is to start a journey of discussion around how we're coping with the virus on today's broadcast, and whether it's myself or Rick or somebody else doing next week's. I'd love to bring up these questions on a future episode. The two that kind of stood out for Maria and the team, one was from Alex Bainbridge. And I think it was very witty, Alex. I can hear you saying it when I read it. Who's going to give permission to restart travel? I love it because it really summarizes everything there. I think that's worthy of a 10-minute conversation with yourself next week, because I'd love to get your own. I know we've been nagging you to join us this week, but I'd love to get perspective from yourself and somebody else and give that some proper time. I can't fit that in at the end. It's too good a question. Another one was, and I don't like the question, but I love the answer. The question is, what do we think about over-tourism and the impact from the virus? It seems like one thing seems to have cured the other. And I find that that's a very interesting question, to be answered. I don't like the question, but I think the answer is going to be interesting. So the topic from ITB last year was around sustainability and how we can solve over tourism. Maybe we'll bring that up on a future episode of a panel like this. And I'd love to get everybody's feedback after today. Once you've heard the podcast, once you've seen it on YouTube, fire in a couple of comments to Maria or to the team here at Travel Massive, and they'll come back to us. We're all very tight knit. We'll hear what you have to say. So just I'm going to bring in Ian so we can wrap up. Ian, you're still in quarantine, of course. You're in Berlin. I want to mention, of course, that there is a Stranded in Berlin on party tonight, but I wanted to leave you the last word. It was your idea to say, let's reach out to a friend in the business. What can we do for the following week? What should be our priorities?
Gosh, you've put me on the spot now. Let me think. I mean, I think the thing is that, you know, and I've been writing this for the last couple of weeks now about this, is that you have to stay informed because the situation is continually changing. You know, it's frustrating for everyone, and you know, and we have to expect that there will be disruption, you know, at least in the short term, before we get the black and white, which is what, you know, Sandra is saying that, you know, that we need. You know, I think, and this is my thoughts, is that speaking to a few people, including Alex, I think, who's listening, is that, you know, if you look at China as a reference, they're at their peak after 3 months. So that means that, you know, for Europe and the United States, we're 2 weeks in. So there's another 2 months until we hit the peak, and then it will subside. So, you know, this thing will be over. I am certain of that. And so, you know, that's I guess the light at the end of the tunnel is, you know, 3 to 6 months time, but that's what everyone has to plan for and has to strategize for. So what do we do in the meantime? We need to have these discussions. You know, we need to stay connected. You know, the Stranded in Berlin community was created just like that, you know, and immediately I think, you know, there were 300 people in that group supporting each other and helping each other. And, you know, that's really the key thing. You know, we didn't need to put the Travel Massive brand on Stranded in Berlin or take credit for it. It was literally just something that I felt compelled to do, you know, and, you know, and I think that demonstrates that people need channels to be able to communicate and share information. And I think that as an industry, we also have to be able to do that quicker. I don't think that we can, you know, now get our updates at a quarterly trade show of what's going on. So, you know, that's out of the window. So I think things like this, like the discussion that we're having, is something that I think that we're going to need to have, you know, on a weekly basis to stay informed. You know, and as I have also said, you know, we need to empathize because, you know, everyone is impacted by this, from, you know, small businesses to even big businesses. The employees of those large businesses, they're at risk. So, you know, as I said, I think we have to find someone in the travel industry that you think might be hurting and reach out to them, you know, ask them how they're going and see in what ways that you can help. And, you know,
whether that's with your talents or even just your emotional support, there's that gesture, that first reaching out is the point. Yep. It's not the how, it's the
this bowl of fruit is like, you know, it's just a bowl of fruit. But I mean, the way that this was provided to me, and someone, you know, made the effort to go to a supermarket and shop and fill my fridge, you know, full of food, you know, that really moved me. You know, I cried because of it. And, you know, and I think that they're the things that we have to be able to help each other out. Even Rick has like delivered food to me a couple of times, and, you know, we just have to be able to help each other out. So that's sort of my thing. And I just add one other thing, which is, you know, this is an all-consuming, almost overwhelming kind of situation that we're in. And I think, you know, when all of this was sort of happening on last Friday night or Saturday, I actually went to the cinemas and watched a movie and took my mind off of things. So, you know, find other things and other activities to occupy yourself with, you know, as well, and enjoy yourself.
Okay, Ian, thanks for giving us something to focus on at the end there. There's quite a lot of thoughts to reflect on. I know we'll be processing this recording through different channels. You'll be able to catch us on Facebook, on YouTube, as well as, hopefully all going well, on the Travel Massive podcast itself. You've been watching the first, hopefully of many, but certainly the first of Stranded in Berlin, our reaction to the COVID-19 outbreak in the business and how we can all cope with it. Your feedback, of course, and your comments are absolutely appreciated and adored. We'll go through all of the chat transcript in the coming hours afterwards to see what we can do to improve this. If you want to find out how you can reach out to us, you'll find that in either your show notes, a pinned comment below the video, or in the description box in YouTube. So check us out and figure out how to contact us with some of your feedback. You'll find all of the resources that were linked through the chat in that description as well. So the items that we shared about the spread, the industry resources and all of that, you'll find that there, along with all of the speaker bios. Make sure, if you are in Berlin, to safely join us for the Unparty that's taking place. You'll find all of the details about that on travelmassive.com. But at least for now, this is me, Kevin, in Dublin, signing off. Thank you for joining us on this episode. Thank you.